I went through this scenario with a nurse in leadership recently, and I asked her, which physician would you want to work with? The me who's had the training or the me who hasn't? She said, oh, by all means, the physician who's had the training. I said, okay, well, let me ask you this. Which healthcare worker would you want to be? The healthcare worker who's had the training or the healthcare worker who hasn't? She's like, yeah, the healthcare worker who's had the training. I said, so when are you going to book me to do your training?
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to Clicks and Bricks. Today we have Dr. Nanette Nuessle with us. She is the founder of Beat Down Burnout. We're super excited to hear some of her tips and tricks and her story on how she got started into this journey. How are you doing today, Dr. Nan?
I am fantastic. Thank you
for joining us today. We are honored to have you on the show. Before we jump into what is break down burnout, I don't know why I'm struggling so much to say that. Maybe I need to look at myself a little closer. Before we get into breakdown burnout, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history that set you up to take this transition into this new company?
Thank you for having me, Ken. And it's Beat Down Burnout. I am a pediatric hospitalist. I'm a locum pediatric hospitalist, which means I am a physician who takes care of children in the hospital, and I travel around the country to do that. I have worked so far north in Maine that we would go south to Canada for dinner. I have worked, yeah, that was fun the first time. I've worked so far south in Arizona that I kept having to call Verizon and tell them I wasn't in Mexico and to take those charges back off. So eventually they gave me a free international calling plan before that was ever a real thing. I've worked in Hawaii twice, and if you can get somebody to pay you to go to Hawaii and work, I strongly recommend that.
Yes, I would recommend that as well.
I've worked in the Navajo Nation. I've worked all kinds of places, and I've had incredible adventures along the way. But one of the things that I saw everywhere I worked was burnout, and I saw bullying as a driver of burnout. I saw physicians bullying physicians. I saw physicians bullying nurses. More recently, and in incredible numbers, I see nurses bullying physicians, and I've also seen nurses bullying nurses. And
nurses are tough.
Nurses are tough.
The nurses that I know would make really good bullies. They're not, though. They're super sweet people, but they are tough.
You do not cross a line. When a nurse draws a line in the sand, you do not cross that line. You do not cross that line.
I want to talk about that word bullying a little bit, because we're living in a time, or at least it feels like a time to me, to where the nuance of words holds a lot more weight than it ever did before. People are really looking at how you're saying stuff to people. So like when somebody's tired someday and you just say, hey, suck it up and pull up your bootstraps and get to work, would that be bullying?
No, I don't think that would.
That would be camaraderie. We're in it together.
More often than not.
Right.
And if it's a coach saying it to you in the gym, you do another set of reps.
Yes. But in real life, I think tone and things like that, sometimes when you're trying to help somebody build them up to get them to do it, we can use words and we can say it in tones that feel like bullying, I think. Even though the intent isn't there to be there, I think sometimes it can be perceived that way. And unfortunately, perception to the receiver is the receiver's reality. So I definitely can see that happen at scale.
Tone of voice is a lot of it, but the kinds of things that I was seeing were certain people were getting the short stick in the call schedule over and over again. Certain people were always being expected to take call on holidays where other people never had to. Certain classes of people were not being able to access various bonuses. And a lot of it came down to diversity, equity, and inclusion. For example, the first clinic that I worked at, pediatrics was the only department that was expected to be on call both Saturday and Sunday and most federal holidays. And it was the only department where the providers were predominantly female. So you take a department where most of the physicians are female and you tell them that they have to work every Sunday and most federal holidays.
Right.
Where the board of directors has no women on it. That's gender-based inequality. Then on top of that, you mandate that they're the only department that all of a sudden, after I worked there for 10 years, all of a sudden we had to go to a 12-hour clinic day. No other department did. In addition to that, the male physicians were bonused a head of household bonus, and the women were not, even if the IRS considered us head of household.
Wow.
That bonus was the equivalent of 30% of their regular salary.
That's huge.
That's huge.
And that's legal to give a head of household bonus to one gender, not the other, or one sex and not the other?
It was a private clinic. They were allowed to do that.
Oh, it would be a civil case. It wouldn't be a criminal case, I guess, at that point. Seems to be like some civil cases should have been opened. But anyway, move forward from there. You're seeing inequalities in the workplace, which we know exist.
Right.
I like to think that they're being whittled away. I would like to see them more chopped away, but I feel like they're being whittled away, at least in these conversations like that. They're not being whittled away?
Being whittled away. I left there after fighting that for nearly 2 decades. I gave up on my magical thinking that it would get better, and I left there. And I went elsewhere. And I started seeing not that degree of payment inequality, but similar inequalities everywhere I went. Most of them based around the call schedule, but some of them also based around pay scales and bonus scales. When you work for a corporation, when it's a physician-owned clinic, they can pretty much do what they want. But when it's a corporation, they kind of have to follow rules about payment. So they can't do bonuses different. They can't do regular pay differently, but they can still bonus differently because there are all kinds of discretions about bonuses. So I saw people being bonused differently based on gender, based on religion, based on, I just don't like the way that person looks. I don't like how they dress. Still within dress code, but I don't like how they dress.
Right.
And it was everywhere I went. And being a locum physician, I've now worked in 15 different states.
Right.
And I don't see it getting better.
Wow.
Things finally came to a head when I went to a small rural hospital, and they had specifically recruited someone with my skills, someone who could resuscitate newborns, someone who could stabilize them and wait for transport if they needed to go to another hospital with a higher level of care. And at first it was awesome. I was working with a great team of people. But they were also either all travelers or had only signed a temporary contract. And within 3 to 6 months, they were all replaced by other people.
Right.
And the new permanent people were not as nice. I ended up with a charge nurse who did not like me, who argued every single order I wrote, argued every policy with me, including policies I'd helped write. I'd helped them pass through the entire chain of command, the medical executive committee, the board of directors, all of that. She didn't care. And I spent a lot of my time educating people, educating new parents, educating grandparents, and educating our new nurses, because a lot of the nurses we had there were only out of school a year or two. And I have 30 plus years experience. This charge nurse had 5.
Right.
But she would literally go behind me and contradict everything I'd said. And this was actually a safety issue. She was giving misinformation to parents about how to care for their children. And it got so bad that the anxiety level in the unit was sky high. Nurses were leaving, and labor and delivery is a coveted place to work. People fight for years to get a job in labor and delivery. People aren't dying there. People are being born there. Everybody
Right.
wants to work labor and delivery. And when you get a job there, people stay for life. We were losing people. And a friend of mine told me about this thing called BANK. Now, BANK is an acronym which stands for Blueprint, Action, Nurturing, and Knowledge. BANK is a form of personality science. And it's the only methodology in the world scientifically validated to tell you or your colleagues' decision-making process in 90 seconds or less. And I believe you took your...
I did.
Yeah. And I've taken mine. Mine is primarily this. And this charge nurses with this, these are opposing personality types. They're like polar opposites. And in the workplace, sometimes they're attracted, like the way opposites attract.
Right.
And sometimes they repel each other. And in our case, they repelled each other and we butted heads.
Right.
So the thing about the BANK methodology is these personality types are based on people's core values. So I began speaking to her in the values of her personality type. And when I did, she no longer had any traction with which to start an argument. She didn't quite know what to say to me, but what was amazing was the people around her who had been ganging up with her against me, they kind of shifted and they no longer wanted to have anything to do with the bullying.
Right.
And she just really didn't know what to say to me anymore. Within 3 days, the anxiety level in our unit went from a 10 out of 10 to a 3 out of 10. Nurse managers from other units, within 3 weeks, they started coming to me and asking me to do conflict resolution in their units. Physicians asked me to help them with contract negotiations.
Yeah.
I started doing lunch and learns. That's what we call it when we do an informal teaching group over the lunch hour. I started doing lunch and learns around the hospital. And we would code. That's what we call it when we do somebody's personality thing. We call it cracking their code. We started coding the staff in the other units. And we would take little star stickers like you get at Walmart, just little cheapy little stars. Like you would remember getting stars on your homework in grade school? Yep. Those are the stars we use. And we would take those and we would put them on the back of people's name tags in the hospital in the order of their code.
Okay.
When people were having trouble communicating with one another, they would reach over and they would turn around somebody's ID badge and start speaking to them in the first 2 colors of their code. And so when you get your code, the first color is who you are. The second color is who you want to be. The third color is who you are when you're stressed.
Okay.
And the fourth color is like going too far in a first date. So you speak to these first 2 and you can pull someone out of stress and more into their native state. So they would speak to the first 2 colors. I didn't go through all of that with them. I just said, when somebody's stressed, talk to their first 2 colors. Talk to the values of those first 2 colors. And so people would memorize all 48 values. So they would know what the values were of those first 2 colors. And what happened was anxiety went down throughout the entire hospital. And this was in the middle of COVID.
Right.
Anxiety went down in the entire hospital. we found that teams became more collaborative and less competitive. Nurses were more willing to float from one unit to another, which, if you've ever worked in a hospital, that's something that's really difficult to get people to do. They're very loyal to their little group.
Right.
So getting them to float from one group to another is one of those things that's really helped staffing. And
Yes.
they made friends in other units, which meant the whole system within that hospital started working better together.
All right. So that's the bank method.
Yeah.
And some of those values, I took the test. Like one of the values was rules and science.
Yeah.
Things of that nature, right?
Yes. The values for the blueprint are stability, structure, systems, planning, processes, predictability, responsibility, duty, rules, credentials, titles, and tradition.
Right. And that was my number one.
Rules.
Right? That was rules are
number one. And rules was the one that stood out to you.
Well, it stood out. Stability is one that really stood out to me. Okay. Rules is the one that I struggle with on that card, but I can frame my own rules. So we can go down that. But the stability and the structure and those things are things that I value at a very first, right? It's the first thing that I value. After that, then it comes the fun stuff, right? But I'm sure everybody's a little different. I'm going to have my wife take it tonight when I get home for sure.
Cool. Awesome.
Maybe we can talk to each other a little bit better. So you learn about this bank methodology.
Yes.
And you start implementing it in your day job.
Yeah.
At the hospital, and you see massive changes. Do you scratch your head and say, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life and take that path? Or tell us about that transition now from that moment to when you start Beat Down.
I think I left out a step. I heard about this bank methodology from a friend, and I knew then the potential for this to work in the hospital system and to truly change how we communicate with one another in the hospital. I saw the potential then, and that's why I signed up for the course.
Okay.
Seeing it work in that hospital was just verification of what it could do. I knew when I first saw it, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this a business because I know how impactful it can be and how many lives it can change.
Wonderful.
So seeing it work in the hospital was simply verification. It was proof of life.
Right. Okay. And so at 3 days in, you see changes in the hospital.
Yeah.
Do you put your resignation in and run full blast, or tell us about?
No, I was in a contract, and I'm one of those people who honors contracts.
I do most of the time.
Yeah. I was in year 2 of a 3-year contract.
Okay.
So no, I wasn't leaving anytime soon.
Right.
But the way I was working, I worked 168 hours straight and then had 168 hours off. So I worked 1 week on, 1 week off. And you were literally on duty that entire week. So on my weeks off, I started my coaching business.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I mean, I'm pretty fanatical about work, and I've pulled a couple 72-hour shifts. Never pulled a 168-hour shift.
I don't recommend it.
That I don't even think that's healthy.
No.
Okay.
This is why we have burnout in healthcare, and we had people working 240-hour shifts at that hospital.
No sleep.
I didn't say no sleep.
Okay.
I said
you're sleeping in the hospital.
No, you don't even have to sleep in the hospital. You can sleep at your home, but you're on duty. And when you're on duty, you do not sleep as well. You get phone calls.
Well, in that case, as a business owner, I've been on call for 20 years.
You get phone calls. You get called back in. And even if you don't get called, you don't sleep as well because you know you're on the hot spot.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know from very, very close to that particular problem.
Yeah.
Panic attacks, fear, anxiety, all of those things. It's PTSD at the end of the day, right? You have, the phone rings and your heart rate goes up. It's just the way what the world is. Oh, I have to go. And it's never an easy thing to do, right? It's something bad's happening when you're getting called in. So, I am way familiar with that, being in the IT industry, and a founder almost my entire life. So I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but I'm super excited that you're helping other people now.
But I do know that this works, and I do know that people grow through this. One of the hospitals that I've worked at more recently, when I first started there, I was working, and I had actually gone back to the hotel and gone to sleep, and I get a call that they'd had a baby born with multiple congenital anomalies, which means multiple birth defects. And they called me, and Dr. Nuessle, can you come back in and see this baby? I'm like, yes, and? Well, we just weren't sure if you'd come see the baby. Will you come see the baby? I'm like, sure, and? Okay, I'll be there in a few minutes. So I grab my shoes, my white coat, my car keys, and I drive back. 6 minutes later, I get a call from a different nurse. And she's screaming at me, where are you? Why aren't you here yet? We've been breathing for this baby for 20 minutes. We need you now. This is a very different conversation.
Right.
Than the first one. And by not telling me that this baby was in distress in the first phone call, they've put my license at risk. They've put their licenses at risk.
Yeah.
And I took a deep breath. I said, well, I'm halfway to the hospital. She's like, where are you? Where is that? What street are you on? I'm like, this is only my third day in town. I don't know what street I'm on.
Right.
But the GPS says I'm 3 minutes out. She's like, okay, I'll tell the nurse they're taking care of the baby. Goodbye. Wait. And I took another deep breath. This would be an excellent opportunity for you to give me more information about this baby. And she did. And I gave some orders, and I kept her on the line and got more information and kept giving orders until I pulled into the parking lot and went running up the stairs.
Right.
Now, prior to having that training, which our training is communications based, it's relationship based. We teach EQ, we teach leadership, we do all of that. Prior to having that training, I would have answered that nurse in the same way in which she called me, meaning I would have yelled back at her.
Yes.
I think most of us would.
A younger me would have as well. Today, it's calm them down, get them down to a level head, so that we can communicate. Right.
And
most of the time, I'm there 90%, 10% of the time, I'll yell back. I'll be honest. I fail frequently still.
I would understand that. And in the healthcare world, the nurse who yells at you doesn't get written up. The physician who yells back does.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I went through this scenario with a nurse in leadership recently, and I asked her, which physician would you want to work with? The me who's had the training or the me who hasn't? She said, oh, by all means, the physician who's had the training. I said, okay, well, let me ask you this. Which healthcare worker would you want to be? The healthcare worker who's had the training or the healthcare worker who hasn't? She's like, yeah, the healthcare worker who's had the training. I said, so when are you going to book me to do your training? When are you going to book me to train your organization? So she is.
And it starts with the personality type so that you can meet people where they're at.
Yes. It starts with knowing how to communicate with them, knowing if you're speaking to somebody who wants the structure, the stability, the plans. If you're going in to talk with this person, you book in advance. You don't just walk in their door.
Nope.
You book in advance. You have a plan in writing with a copy to hand to them, and you show up 15 minutes early. You book with this person, you walk in their door, hey, can I take you out to lunch? Let's go to the fancy restaurant and we'll talk about it.
Right.
and you better dress up. When you book with this person, this is the action personality. They value freedom, flexibility, and fun, and everything's about image head to toe. It's all for show. They don't show up on time for anything. The party doesn't start till they get there. This is the nurturing personality type. They value relationships over money and personal development and teamwork and ethics and morality. So if you come at them with the idea that you're going to make money off of them, they will shut you down and push you out the door.
Yes. But those are the best employees.
They are the best employees. And this is the code of most of our bedside carers. This is our nurses. This is our RTs. These are our phlebotomists. And our physicians often have this as either their first or second code. So when you talk to these people, if you're going to acknowledge them, you better acknowledge the whole team. And your acknowledgement needs to be significant. It needs to be heartfelt. And most hospitals, the only acknowledgement they're doing is a pizza party. There's nothing heartfelt about a pizza party.
Right.
It needs to be individualized enough to really touch their core, but you can't leave a single person out. And then the fourth personality type we call knowledge. And these people value logic, science, research and development, technology, and expertise. And these people, the thing they crave most is to be acknowledged and recognized for their expertise. And what we see happening in hospitals nowadays is physicians are being lumped into a group called providers, which is an insult to the hours and years that they spent getting their credentials.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's an insult. They've spent 2 to 3 times the time investment of the nurse practitioners and the PAs. So to lump them all together, it really is considered an insult. So you need to recognize their mastery and their expertise. They're not saying they don't want to work with NPs and PAs, but they do want to be recognized for the fact that they made a bigger sacrifice.
Right.
So that needs to be kept in mind. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with when we look at the different personalities.
All right. Can I have a tie in those personalities?
Yes.
Okay.
You can be divergent. Have you seen that movie, Divergent?
I haven't. I need to watch it, but I have not seen it yet.
There are people, I mentioned to you when we talked earlier that you can give a number value to each of these 4 personalities up to 25, because you can have 100%. So when we do a longer assessment, when you do a deeper dive with us, we do a longer assessment where you take more questions, and it takes about 15 to 20 minutes as opposed to 90 seconds. And you score each of these. And there are people who score evenly across the board on their personalities, and they are said to be divergent. I do know 1 or 2 of these people who are truly divergent. More often, I find that there are people who score the same on 2 or even 3 of the scores. I work with a surgeon who scores 25 on, she scores 25 on these 3 and a 20 on this one.
Okay. I'll tell you that first and last card were really close for me. And there were some things that kind of turned me off on the last one that turned me on the first one. So I'm like, we'll throw that over there. Right. That was interesting to me. But the first 2, like those values, they're in my jam. Like I like a lot of rules, but I like to have a whole lot of fun too. Right. And that's my general MO. So wonderful. So now you got the business running.
Yes.
Right. So, you got validation in the hospital that you're working at. When did you start the business? What year was that?
Well, I finished the training in June of 2020. So some people say that technically I started the business in June of 2020, but I
Okay.
didn't have an actual business. Hadn't figured out in my mind what my business was going to be until the end of October that year. It's
Of 2020.
Yeah, I opened my S
Okay.
Corp at the end of October 2020, did the first ad for it the first week in November, and got my first sale the following week. My first corporate sale the following week.
First ad, got your first sale in a week. Congratulations. That's amazing.
That is amazing. I expected it to be that easy all the time. It's not.
Oh, you want me to tell you where I got on my first company?
Please.
My very first company I was 17, 18 years old, living in my parents' basement. And I bought a video camera and an editing studio, hustled to get all that together. And I opened the Yellow Pages and I started an A. I called people. It's like, I'd love to make a commercial for your business. And I got all the way to P in the Yellow Pages before I got my first sale. But it set the trajectory for the rest of my life. So I don't complain about that at all. It was a lot of failures, a lot of shut up, you dumb kid, and hanging up on me, but kept going. So congratulations. First week in, you get your first sale, but you're still practicing medicine.
Yeah,
Do you still practice medicine today?
I still practice medicine today. And there's a reason for that. I feel like I still need to keep my finger on the pulse of what's happening on the front line.
Okay. I understand that. Yeah, I maintain more work than I probably should be doing just because I love it. And, those idle hands are somebody's play toy for sure. And I like to keep that away from me as far as I possibly can. So, all right. So now you've got the business running. You're a year and a half in.
Yeah.
Things aren't as easy as a client every week. And I'm assuming the clients, this is not a $29 product that you're offering, right? Yeah. This is what kind of companies you specialize in medicine and helping hospitals. Mm-hmm. Is there a certain kind of hospital that you really focus on? Rural or urban?
No,
or both? Okay.
Both. So when I work with hospitals, I have a program specifically for hospitals where we go in and we do an on-site training for 8 hours, and they can break that up into more than one day if they like, but we prefer to come in and do one day and then follow that up with what we call a 90-day accountability program, where we meet with them for an hour and a half a week for 90 days.
Okay.
That's our premier program. We also have that same program open to individual healthcare workers.
Okay.
There's CME available for people who participate in that.
Okay. So I can come into your program as an individual or as a company.
Yes.
And you'll help both sides of that fence.
Yes, I will.
Wonderful. Is there, on the individual side, what kind of, am I experiencing something today that would make me a good candidate, or is there something that I want to accomplish that would make me a good candidate? Or is it both?
I generally meet with people one-on-one and find out what their goals are.
Okay. So this is more to get over their goals is I'm here and I want to be there.
Yeah.
Right. And that's usually a big one. But there's also just the person that's I'm here. I don't know where I want to be, but I'm not currently happy.
Right. We get a lot of that. Of that.
And I think that's more common than not.
A friend of mine calls it crossing the river. What they're looking for, a lot of our healthcare workers are in a state where they're dealing with the physical manifestations of stress, anxiety, and burnout. The night before work, they have nausea, vomiting, headaches. They can't sleep. They either can't eat or they overeat. And all of this is driven by anxiety, stress, burnout. Some of them may also have depression. Some of them may have developed drinking problems. Some of them may have developed drug problems. I meet with them in advance to find out where they are in that process. If they actually have a drug or alcohol problem, we will refer them to someone who can help them with that, because that's not what we do.
Right.
At Beat Down Burnout, we do not do that. If they're not,
And quick pause. If you're watching the episode and you have those problems, I'm a huge advocate for Smart Recovery.
yes,
One of the best programs out there, in my opinion. And that's from somebody that's been through all the programs in their life.
But then we can get you into a program. If you're not ready for that full program that I just spoke of, we have smaller programs. If you want to be put on a leadership track, we have more extensive programs.
Okay. So you have different programs to meet people where they're at in their journey
And what it is
on that path.
Right.
Now, I want to pump the brakes a little bit, because I think there's what you're doing can create a lot of value for a lot of different small businesses out there, small and large businesses. And specifically on the marketing side, right? I lean really hard on the marketing side. I love studying marketing. You have this bank system, burnout coaching for the medical community, right?
Not just medical, all of healthcare.
Healthcare community.
Just doctors.
Right?
We do all of healthcare.
And I'm going to bet when you made that first ad, you were targeting the healthcare community.
I was.
Right. But we had some conversations before we started recording, and you sold this service to IT professionals as well.
Okay. I was so excited. I was so happy. 2020. Nobody's going out anywhere. I'm part of this virtual happy hour of my friends, and half my friends are in IT. I make this announcement to my friends, and they're like, "Oh, so cool. Does this work for IT?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Where do I sign up?" Credit card, PayPal.
Absolutely.
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not going to say no. So my first clients were actually in IT. They weren't even IT at that time. They were in IT. My first client was in IT. My second client was in IT. My third client was actually in marketing. My fourth client was a parent with burnout.
Right.
So we have a section.
This is so important for a lot of business owners, because when we talk about niching down or finding your client persona and all of these things, people are so afraid to do that. It's one of the things that I find most common in business owners when they're starting a marketing campaign. Like, but no, I can sell to this person over here too, or I can sell to this person over here too. Like, I understand that. But if you're not talking to a specific person, then you're not talking to anybody. And if you are talking to healthcare professionals, the IT professional can see that jump, right? Even though it's not catered to them, the message isn't catered to them, they can see that it's catered to somebody specific. And just because you're marketing to somebody specific doesn't mean you can't sell your product to the other person, nor does it mean that you shouldn't have multiple marketing campaigns. Because I'm going to imagine that you now have a marketing campaign for healthcare professionals and a marketing campaign for IT professionals. And there are two different campaigns talking to two different people.
I actually have never needed a marketing campaign for IT professionals. They find me.
Because we're just so broken.
They find me. If you market to healthcare IT will find you. You just need to, you need to know how to speak to them.
Right.
And the personality science helps, but I think it also helps that I used to own a healthcare IT company.
Right. And
I have that back.
Today I provide services to rural hospitals only. I don't like dealing with the big companies. And my first corporate job was at Washington University Medical School. So I worked in the med library. And
it's my first hospitalization. I was 5.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what I learned at that experience is that if you are focusing on healthcare professionals, healthcare facilities are they're entire cities. Every single profession that there exists within a hospital. And specifically, if you have a collegiate hospital, every professional is there by far, right? They're entire cities, right? Wash U Barnes Hospital, that whole campus is huge.
Yes.
And there's electricians and plumbers and psychiatrists and doctors and lawyers and everything, every profession you can imagine. So you're going to pick a target to focus on. Healthcare is every single niche in the market as well.
And then there's the whole health and wellness people that attach themselves to you.
Right.
And they're like, can we come along?
Yes.
And you can say no, but they'll come along anyway.
Right.
And so within the bank organization, now there are coaching organizations and there are coaching organizations. A lot of coaching organizations, once you graduate with your certificate, they're done with you. Bank's
Right.
not like that.
Okay.
Others are like an MLM, and you can only talk to the person who brought you in. You can't do
Okay.
anything without going through the person who brought you in. Bank is like a family. And we meet at least once a week on Zoom, and everybody talks to everybody else. And I've been put in charge of the healthcare bank people, which is all the MDs, all the nurses, everybody who does Reiki, everybody who does sound bowls, everybody who does massage. We've got social workers, and I'm in charge of that whole little group,
Oh, wow.
which
Okay.
really isn't all that little, but I'm in
Right.
charge of that whole group, and we all talk to each other. And the coaches and trainers who brought them in have all sort of given them their blessing to talk to me and be part of. And so when I run a 12-week session, I can tap any of them to come work with me and assist me with that 12-week session. And if somebody wants Dara as their coach for their one-on-one coaching during that 12 weeks, they can also buy massage or sound bowl sessions from Dara.
Right.
If they want Malcolm to do their one-on-one coaching, they can also tap him about his social work expertise.
Wonderful.
And I don't know any other coaching community that does that.
That is very unique. Yes. I had my first Reiki about a month ago. It's
Isn't
very
it great?
interesting.
Isn't it great?
Yes, it was. It was very, very interesting. So wonderful. Dr. Nan, I've had a blast talking with you today and learning about your business. Before we go, you also have some communication tips that you want to share with the audience. Where would they find those tips at?
Actually, if you go to my website, it on the homepage, it will say Dr. Nan's communication tips. And you can, up at the top, it'll say Dr. Nan's communication tips. You can go right to that spot and click that, and you can download the tips right there.
Wonderful. And that's 3 communication tips that will help you with or without the bank. And we're going to put the URL at the bottom here, and we're going to put the URL to the test as well. So you can get your personality score and start learning about that stuff as well. Dr. Nan, I've had such a blast talking with you today. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with before we go?
You know, if you guys need me, you can connect with me through the website. I am just here to help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching today's episode of Clicks and Bricks. Get to work.